Minister.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. It is widely recognised that Northern Ireland's natural environment and its habitats and species are under considerable pressure, having suffered continuous biodiversity loss in recent decades. Indeed, the recent evidence report from the Office for Environmental Protection highlights the precarious state of biodiversity here and the key pressures that need to be tackled to first halt biodiversity loss and then restore the diversity of Northern Ireland's habitats and species. Recognising the importance of a more nature-positive future for all and nature's role in tackling climate change, DAERA's strategic objectives reflect the need for specific measures to restore our natural ecosystems, such as those set out in Northern Ireland's first Environmental Improvement Plan. The forthcoming Nature Recovery Strategy, Peatland Strategy, Climate Action Plan and Climate Change Adaptation Plan will also include ambitious measures to tackle biodiversity loss and climate change together, supporting green growth and nature recovery. My department has also been driving forward programmes to enhance our terrestrial, freshwater and marine biodiversity, including through the Environmental Farming Scheme. Over 58,000 hectares of protected and priority habitats and their associated species are being actively managed to support their maintenance and recovery over time. 36 projects totalling more than £7.5 million, supported by the Environment Fund, supporting habitat and species recovery. Our review of the Nutrients Action Programme and forthcoming ammonia strategy will also aim to address our excess nutrient pollution problem, a key issue in our biodiversity loss. Public consultations on a number of marine conservation-based strategies and action plans for habitats and species are also underway. I am fully committed to restoring our natural habitats, species and ecosystems and taking the necessary steps to deliver a nature-positive and climate-resilient future for all.
Mr Durgan.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I thank the Minister for his answer, in which the Minister referred to both the recent OEP report and indeed the Nutrients Action Programme. Given that the OEP report identified as one of the key drivers of biodiversity loss being an unsustainable nutrient surplus, can the Minister advise us when the Nutrients Action Programme will be published?
I thank the member for his question. I'm very well of the OEP report and in terms of drivers of biodiversity loss, and it was very stark reading, and I would encourage everyone within this House and beyond to read the report. The NAP, as you outline, is a key intervention in terms of dealing with that nutrient overload in our rivers, lakes and lochs, and it's my intention and hope that we move to consultation of that in January.
Brogan.
Thank the Minister for his answer. Has the Minister given any consideration to specific biodiversity legislation, or does he feel that existing strategies are enough to reverse the decline in biodiversity here?
Minister.
So, as I have outlined in my response to Mark, we're taking forward a number of strategies around this area. In the shortened mandate that we have, and within the resource pressures within my department, the ability to take forward legislation in a specific area is something that is challenging for me. I am aware, however, that the originator of this question, Mark H. Durkin, is bringing forward a private member's bill. I've already met with the member in relation to that, and hopefully we can work cooperatively in relation to this, because I think all of us in the House have got a commitment to improving our environment, and if we can work together on these things, we can achieve so much more.
Andrew McMurray.
Thank you, Minister. Just to ask the Minister how the protection of peatlands can improve biodiversity.
Sure.
So peatlands are absolutely key in this, and we're already doing work in that regard, and we have shared island funding, which has proven really, really useful in relation to the actions we can take towards peatland restoration. And I've seen some of that work across Northern Ireland in action in recent months. But what we want to do is we want to take that further and bring forward our peatland strategy, because we can use our peatlands as a way forward in terms of tackling the challenges we have, not only, but specifically in relation to greenhouse gas emissions.
Blair.
No. Yeah.
Thanks, Mr Speaker. Question number 2.
Minister.
I remain committed to bringing forward legislation to regulate third-party sales of pups and kittens in Northern Ireland, and I expect to be in a position to announce policy proposals by the end of this year, along with a number of other key proposals which I am confident will deliver improvements to the lives of companion animals. It is my desire that any legislation will be a significant step change for Northern Ireland and delivers for citizens and stakeholders. That is why I have invited the Northern Ireland Companion Animal Welfare Group to meet with me on the 4th of December so we can discuss priority reforms for animal welfare. At that meeting, I will outline my department's vision for a version of Lucy's Law, which will meet our local context and needs. One such option is measures that would go beyond a prohibition on third-party sellers. It is my desire that any legislation introduced in this space will generate greater transparency and accountability in the marketplace by enabling purchasers to identify where the pet has came from. Therefore, I am also minded to bring forward further measures so we can improve animal welfare in Northern Ireland. Any proposals I bring forward will, of course, be subject to public consultation.
Mr. Blair.
Mr. Speaker, I thank the Minister for that reply and the news that there has been real progress on bringing forward Lucy's Law, which will be widely welcomed across the animal welfare sector. Can I ask, in addition to that, what measures the Minister is taking to improve animal welfare more generally in the remainder of this mandate?
So I'm very, very passionate about improving animal welfare standards here in Northern Ireland. It is something that we have lost pace with due to the collapse of the Assembly, and I'm determined to do the work I can within the resources within my department to catch up upon that. So I will be engaging with stakeholders because I want to do this as a process of co-design, and I want to work together on this. And as part of that engagement, we'll be discussing some future measures we can take forward together to improve animal welfare. I'm already of the mind very clearly that we should bring forward a ban on the use of shock collars and also compulsory microchipping of cats, as well as also strengthening current legal requirements. It is important we work together on this, and there's many more things we can do to protect animals against cruelty in Northern Ireland.
Deborah Erskine.
Thank the Minister for his answers so far. He will know that I've raised this in the Chamber before in relation to my own constituency in terms of puppy farming. But I'm interested to know what level of council engagement has been taking place in relation to Lucy's Law, because there seems to be a slight turning a blind eye to this in council areas. The Lucy's Law gives an opportunity to limit one breeding licence per premises. So what level of council engagement is happening right now?
Minister.
So two aspects from your question. I think if you're aware of any concerns from district council engagement, if you bring it to myself, I can engage with the councils around that constructively. The stakeholder engagement will include district councils in terms of our reforms of animal welfare legislation, because they're key partners in this, and it's something I wish to discuss in terms of dog breeding establishments at that forthcoming meeting.
Anya Murphy.
Collier, and as the Minister is aware, a recent investigation carried out by Victoria Johnson of the Impartial Reporter highlighted a number of loopholes within the current dog breeding establishment legislation. Will the Minister consider undertaking a fundamental review of existing legislation in relation to dog breeding establishments?
Minister.
So I read the Impartial Reporter and the reports and concerns around this issue. It's something that is on my mind and is of great concern to me, and that's why when we get together very soon with those stakeholders, this is going to be an issue on the agenda, because I get the public concern, because I also share it, and we want to look at what more we can do in this area.
Timothy Gallison. Minister.
You will be aware from my answer to his previous question, I have no role to play in this matter.
Mr. Gallison.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Special advisors taking up new jobs have to comply with the Northern Ireland Civil Service Standard of Conduct in order to maintain public trust and avoid the risk that a firm or organisation might gain an improper advantage. That hasn't happened in relation to Dr. Carson. You claim, Minister, there's nothing to see here. Will you therefore be asking the head of the Civil Service to investigate this matter?
Minister.
The head of the Civil Service has no remit in relation to this matter.
Peter Martin.
Thank you very much for your answers so far. Minister, your special advisor told you on Sunday the 4th of August that she was resigning, and you agreed a highly unusual, perhaps some would say unprecedented period of notice of some 9 days. Can the Minister provide any reason for this very short period of notice?
Minister.
This was not highly unusual.
Diana Armstrong.
Question number 4.
Minister.
Bovine TB is one of the most challenging issues faced by both cattle farmers and my department. The cost of delivering the Northern Ireland Bovine TB programme was almost £56 million last year, whilst current estimates indicate an rise in programme cost to approximately £60 million for this financial year. Since becoming Minister, I have heard directly from farmers of the impact this is having from both a financial perspective, but also importantly on their mental and physical health. I'm particularly conscious of the current increase in animal incidence, which now stands at over 1%, as this points towards larger breakdowns and more cattle being slaughtered for disease control. Indeed, over 20,000 cattle have been removed from farms in Northern Ireland in the last 12 months. This, coupled with an increase in the market value of cattle, has seen compensation payments rise from just under £36 million in the last financial year, a significant increase in preceding 5 years, where the average compensation bill was just over £21 million. Removal of cattle from farms also results in consequential losses for industry, particularly for the dairy sector. This is not sustainable. As such, my Chief Veterinary Officer, Brian Dewar, is undertaking a thorough review of matters relating to our bovine TB programme and policy, including the actions contained in the bovine TB eradication strategy. I will be briefing the Assembly's Agriculture, Environment and Rural Affairs Committee on this review this Thursday. It is a key priority for me to work closely with industry and key stakeholders in ways in which we can collaboratively seek to reduce both disease levels and also programme costs, setting Northern Ireland on a path to reduce and ultimately eradicate this costly disease.
Armstrong.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the Minister for his response. Given that 13 months has passed since the previous Minister for Agriculture's proposal for a non-selective cull of badgers was overturned in a judicial review, when will your department confirm its position on the matter?
Minister.
So I'm aware of the outcome of the judicial review because I've read it in terms of the judgment twice. And what we're seeking to do is find a holistic way forward so we can manage the issue associated with TB. And it's beyond just the issue of wildlife. What we need to do is we need to do it collaboratively together, and we need to deal with all the causation factors around this, because that's the only way we're going to be able to drive down the levels of TB, which are, to be honest, the mental health impact upon farmers and the anguish it's causing is a real concern to me. So I'll be going to the committee on Thursday with Brian as Chief Veterinary Officer, and we'll be outlining Brian's report. And I just hope that everyone gives Brian's report a fair hearing, because collectively we need to work together on this issue.
Lynn Dillon.
Corlia, sorry, hearing is not very good. Thank the Minister for his answers so far. Minister, can you outline what collaboration you've had with your counterpart in the 26 counties in relation to this, given that there is quite a gap between the percentages here and there? And is there best practice that we can learn from in the South? And I'm glad to hear you saying that you're worried about the mental health of farmers, because this has a devastating impact for those farm families that are impacted.
Minister.
I thank the member for her question, and it's a really important question. So at the last North-South Ministerial Council, after that I had a lengthy meeting with Charlie McConalogue as the Minister in the South around this specific issue and what they're doing, what we're doing, and how we can work together on this, because we're, in terms of animal health, we're a one All-Ireland unit in relation to this, and we need to share our experience, and we need to work together a bit more closely in relation to that. And that's helping inform some of my decision making around this. But I'm also looking at what's happening in England, Scotland and Wales and beyond in regards to this. So be assured that we are working together on these issues, and it's something I'm keen that we accelerate over the time ahead.
William Irwin.
Would the Minister accept that other regions of the UK and indeed the Republic of Ireland have been much more proactive in their fight against TB and have much lower levels of TB as a result?
So the levels of TB across the UK and Ireland vary, and we know, for example, that Scotland is very, very low if it's considered to be free of TB, where we know the levels in Northern Ireland are unsustainable. I know that deeply, not because of just the financial implications for my department, but this is something that's regularly raised with me wherever I go. So what we've got to do is we've got to take learnings from not just across the UK and Ireland, but beyond, to see how collectively we can drive this down. And I would urge everyone to work with us on this, so we can take learnings from what is the Chief Veterinary Officer's report, and we can chart a better path forward to reduce the incidence levels of TB.
Samuel Hull.
Mr Speaker, and thank you, Minister. Minister, will there be a consultation on future wildlife interventions?
Minister.
So I can confirm, and members will be aware of this, that in terms of any future wildlife interventions, there will be a consultation in relation to that.
Thank the Minister for his answers thus far. Minister, in terms of the financial sustainability of farmers who are dealing with TB, who do appreciate and respect the compensation for beasts that have to be destroyed, but it's the issue around closing the herd down for 12 weeks where cash flows are halted. Have you thought about how farmers can get cash flow through their doors to ease the burden, ease the frustration and the concern and the mental health challenges that they face as a consequence of TB arriving on their farms?
Minister.
Thank you, Justin, for your question. What I would say to people is that the Chief Veterinary Officer's report will be published on Thursday, and I would urge yourself and others to read through that and give consideration to what has been said in regard to that. In relation to the specific issue with regards to compensation, when I took over office in February, the Secretary of State had instructed that there would be a consultation on reducing that compensation from 100% to 90% and then 75%. What I've done is I've worked with the Finance Minister to ensure that we have the funding in place so we don't need to do that. We do need to get assurance for the next financial year that we will be able to continue that position, because it's absolutely key that my department is properly funded so we can fulfil all our statutory functions, including in relation to the issue associated with TB compensation.
John Stewart. Sir.
Sheep scab is one of the most severe skin conditions of sheep. It is highly contagious, responsible for large economic losses, and is a significant welfare concern. Sheep scab remains a notifiable disease in Northern Ireland. The Sheep Scab Order 1970 places a legal obligation on any person who has reason to believe that sheep in their possession or care have sheep scab to notify their local divisionary veterinary office. My department welcomes and continues to support the efforts of industry stakeholders, such as the Northern Ireland Sheep Scab Control and Eradication Stakeholder Group, in tackling sheep scab, and commends them on the success of their pilot, which was Stamp Out Scab. DAERA continues to use social media channels to raise awareness around sheep scab, reminding flock owners to remain vigilant for the signs of sheep scab in their flock. The DAERA website provides details on the disease, including clinical signs, how the disease is spread, and key advice to industry on preventing spread. The department also provides a range of practical support and advice to industry and individually affected flock keepers in order to minimise spread. DAERA staff continue to report cases of sheep scab encountered as part of their official duties. DAERA staff are also involved in market and abattoir inspections and have been reminded to remain vigilant of the signs of sheep scab disease. My department will continue to support industry efforts to tackle this disease, and while we will assist where we can, this must be set in the context of current budget and resource pressures within the department.
Mr. Stewart.
Mr. Speaker, and I thank the Minister for his answer. And you referred, Minister, to the pilot project that was run between August 2022 and August 2023 that coincided with a significant spike in both the numbers of flocks where this disease was confirmed and placed under restriction in that calendar year. Can you confirm what plans you have to build on that pilot project, if any, and are you pursuing a policy of eradication?
Minister.
Thank the member for his supplementary question, and it's a useful question because the Northern Ireland Sheep Scab Pilot Project, which was Stamp Out Scab, as I've previously outlined, ran from August 2022 to October 2023, and the project was co-funded by DAERA and also through the Biotechnology and Biological Sciences Research Council. It has an acronym, which is BBSRC. Levels of disease reporting from before, during and after the project appeared to show that the project had been successful in highlighting awareness around the disease. Reported disease has fallen since the project concluded, but remains higher than pre-project levels. What I will say, and I do value question time because it's about accountability, but it's also about how we work together on these issues. And the question you've raised and highlighting this has prompted me to meet the Chief Veterinary Officer today, and we'll discuss a bit more about how much more we can do in terms of maybe running this pilot again and how much we can raise awareness with the industry.
Michelle McElveen.
I've raised the issue of the department stopping testing of Madi Visna from January 2026, and while he has stated that a decision hasn't yet been made, the sheep industry is quite clear from the discussions that they have had with officials that that is the case, and that 2025 will be a year of transition. I would appeal to the Minister obviously not to stop the testing, but can I ask the Minister when he will give clarification to the industry of the future of MV testing?
Minister.
Thank the member for a question. I know it's been raised in the debate today in terms of sheep support as well, and I'll respond as part of that in terms of those concerns. I would confirm I haven't made any final decision in relation to this. Any decision that I will take on this matter will be communicated at first instance to the committee, which I think it's important that I do that. I would like to give clarity as soon as I can, but I also need to work with officials who are also dealing with other issues as well, such as around the issue of TB. So I'll look at speedily to be able to give clarification on that. Can't give you a defined timescale, but I get the concerns around this. They need to communicate clarity around the situation going forward.
John Buckley.
Mr. Speaker, with your permission, I'd like to answer questions 6, 10 and 12 together. I recognise that the changes announced in the budget regarding agricultural property relief and also business property relief in relation to inheritance tax have generated real concern and anger within the local farming community and also further afield. I expressed these concerns when I met the Secretary of State on the 4th of November and urged him to reconsider these policies. I have also raised the issue with the Deputy Minister of State, Daniel Zeichner, and will continue to do so in meetings with other UK Government ministers. I have encouraged the UK Government to engage further with the farming community so that they have a better understanding of the concerns being raised and look again at this issue. I will also be meeting the Ulster Farmers Union tomorrow to consider next steps. Analysis carried out by my department and placed in the Assembly Library shows that around one-third of farms in Northern Ireland have a land value of more than £1 million. But these farms account for 60% of owned land and the majority of agricultural production. A large proportion of the farms are of significant size will be affected in the dairy sector, which is about 75%. Looking solely at the number of farms does not measure the impact upon the sector. Another issue arising from the budget is the change in terms of ring-fence funding. Although existing funding for agriculture, agri-environment, fisheries and rural development continues to be earmarked by Treasury until 31st of March of next year, it is important to provide certainty on this funding after that. While it is positive that funding levels have been maintained at £332.5 million, it is disappointing that they have not been increased in line with inflation. I have therefore formally asked the Finance Minister that Resourcedale has been baselined in the block grant and is treated as executive earmarked funding for agriculture, agri-environment, fisheries and rural development purposes, and also uplifted in line with inflation as part of the Executive's budget exercise for the next financial year.
Mr. Buckley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Chancellor says that Labour's tax rate on family farms will cost £520 million a year. We are told this is needed to overturn some of the deep dark holes on our public finances. Yet, not even a month later, the same Labour government has committed £536 million to be spent overseas on 10 programmes to promote low-carbon agricultural projects, including Rwanda and Brazil, the 11th largest economy in the world. So can I ask the Minister, do you agree with this wasteful spend of public money? Yes or no? And do you believe that the money should be spent on family farms in the United Kingdom to ensure that they have a viable future?
Mr.
So I've clearly outlined my position in relation to this in terms of the fact that I'm fighting the corner for agriculture in Northern Ireland in terms of the budget and the budget settlement that's arising from that. I think it's really key that we come together both on the issue of inheritance tax but also in terms of funding for agriculture, agri-environment, fisheries and rural development. We need to be unified in terms of our approach around that, to have these funds ring-fenced within Northern Ireland, and also be clear to our message to the UK Government that they should overturn the decision in terms of inheritance tax. That is absolutely key. One thing I would say is that when we were in the European Union, we had our funding as part of the Common Agricultural Policy and Fisheries Policy guaranteed to us in 7-year tranches. Then we left the EU, and that was earmarked until the end of March of next year. I am answering...
Order.
The uncertainty arising from the next financial year onwards is largely due, in terms of the earmarked funding, due to departure from the European Union. People would do well to remember that.
Daniel McCrossan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I ask the Minister, given the widespread concerns to the introduction of this measure, what steps will the Minister be taking to mitigate against the impact of this on family farms across Northern Ireland?
So the issue in relation to inheritance tax is a reserved matter because it's taxation policy taken forward by the UK Government. What I am mindful of is that if this tax change does proceed, and I have received a letter back from Treasury today, very much clearly of the opinion that they're not for turning in regards to this, but I will continue to engage with them and urge them to rethink their matters in regards to the inheritance tax, is that we need to have a much bigger focus upon the issue of succession planning within farming in Northern Ireland. The Department is bringing forward the Farming for the Generations scheme, which is in a pilot initiative at the moment, and there's more details available on our website in regards to that. But what we're going to need to do over the time ahead is to scale that up so we can assist farmers in terms of succession planning, because it is absolutely key we do that.
Matheson.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Bearing in mind the very difficult context that you've set out, can you provide more detail of what work is being undertaken in conjunction with the Finance Minister to secure the earmarked funding for agriculture, agri-environment, fisheries and rural development?
Minister.
So I've written to the Finance Minister. I've also discussed this issue with executive colleagues. I had planned to meet the Finance Minister later on this afternoon, but due to Assembly business, which is the timing of that's moved on, and not be possible to do that, but I will seek to reschedule that meeting and make it very clear in terms of my continued call for us to have those funds earmarked within Northern Ireland, so we can give certainty to not just the farming community but also to our fishing communities across Northern Ireland, and also be able to provide that support for agri-environment and rural development. I'm very keen to ensure that we can get that clarity as soon as possible, and one of the key issues that we need to agree a draft budget for the next financial year by the Executive as soon as possible.
Declan McAleer.
The Minister will be aware that in England last year, over 50% of land sales was by private equity companies, and super wealthy have no interest in farming. Is the Minister aware of any steps being taken to prevent this happening and so ensure that farmland remains in food production and accessible to farm families? Thank you.
Yeah. So the member highlights one of the reasons that's been cited by Treasury for this change, and I believe that it would be the gift of Treasury to be able to tackle that issue without this having this disproportionate impact it's having in Northern Ireland. Northern Ireland is made up of a patchwork quilt of family farms. They're the bedrock of our rural community, and this change in terms of inheritance tax is causing real concern to those family farms in Northern Ireland. And I will engage with the Ulster Farmers Union tomorrow in terms of some constructive suggestions we can be making back to the UK Government to how to alleviate these concerns and the damage it could have to Northern Ireland.
Michelle Brownlee.
Question 7.
Minister.
The Department for Infrastructure, as the policy lead department for rural transport, provides grant aid from their Rural Transport Fund budget to 11 rural community transport providers across Northern Ireland, across all of Northern Ireland, to deliver their Dial-a-Lift scheme. Through the TRIPSI framework, and I'm sorry that's another acronym, but my department is made up of them, DAERA has worked with the Department for Infrastructure to develop the Assisted Rural Travel Scheme, which is otherwise known as ARTS, which permits rural dwellers entitled to a smart pass to use it on rural community transport vehicles. This intervention brought equivalency to services that urban dwellers were able to avail of and provided free or half-fare travel on trips provided through the Department for Infrastructure's Dial-a-Lift scheme. Since it was introduced in 2011 to 2012, my department provided funding of just over £8 million to the Department for Infrastructure to support the delivery of Assisted Rural Travel Scheme. In recent years, my department has provided £560,000 annually to the Department for Infrastructure. It is intended that this will be transferred to the Department of Infrastructure as part of the opening budget for 2025-26 outcome and included in the department's baseline for future years. My officials will continue to meet with our counterparts in the Department for Infrastructure to ensure the needs of rural dwellers are adequately considered. A working group has been established which includes officials from the Department of Infrastructure, the Department of Health and also my department, and I attended that alongside my two counterpart ministers. The working group will consider whether transport in the community can provide a more cost-effective value-for-money service delivery model to meet the needs of rural users. It will also investigate the potential for community transport providers to be part of a collaborative group of transport options and pathways that can be accessed by the population.
Ms Brownlee.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and thank you to the Minister for his answer. I'm sure he'll agree with me that community transport is absolutely critical, particularly within our rural communities. But, Minister, if you could give an update, I know there was a cross-departmental working group that took place on the 9th of September. Could you provide some more detail in terms of the agreed outcomes and the agreed way forward that this working group will work collaboratively together to deliver for all in Northern Ireland?
Thank you. So it was good to be at that meeting, and I previously covered infrastructure before becoming a minister, and it's something I'm quite passionate about. Kelly Armstrong, as part of our team, keeps me right in relation to these issues, because community transport is absolutely key, particularly within rural communities. So I was glad to be able to attend that meeting with the infrastructure and health ministers, and following that, departmental officials have attended 2 Department of Infrastructure Community Transport cross-departmental working group meetings. Whilst the budget associated with the Assisted Rural Travel Scheme is due to be baselined in the Department for Infrastructure's budget from 2025-26, my officials will continue to meet with DFI to ensure the needs of rural dwellers are given due regard. And this is something I'm quite keen on.
Let's move on to topical questions. We call Patsy McGlone. Thanks very much. Mr. Speaker, could I ask the Minister what assessment has been done into the effectiveness of the Rural Needs Act?
I thank the member for his question. And the Rural Needs Act is a key piece of legislation, and there was a review undertaken in relation to that, and 25 recommendations came back. I'm very aware that the committee considered these issues at its last meeting. I listened back to the audio recording of that over the weekend, and I'm very, very keen to see what more we can do. So it's been outlined in terms of those recommendations, what we could do around that. But what I want to do is I also wanted to go further than that. I want to see, in terms of funding support for rural communities, what more we can do as well.
Mr. McGlone. Thanks, the Minister. And I'm not specifically singling out his department, because for those of us who live in and represent rural areas, we're seeing many of our services being stripped, whether that's health and GP services, whether that's particularly domiciliary care, whether that's infrastructure investment in housing or roads, or indeed the overall issue around sewage disposal. So therefore it's cross-departmental. What can the Minister do to drive those departments through legislative change to be much more effective in tailoring support to those rural areas that are being deprived of services? Minister.
One of the key issues, and you've raised this, is about how we work together as government to ensure the needs of rural communities are heard and acted upon. So what we're doing in conjunction with officials, when we move into consultation very soon, is in terms of our future rural affairs policy, because it's not just my department has a role to play, all government departments have a role in that, and this is why we're bringing that together so we can take a much more unified approach to this, because you've outlined the issues that are being faced within rural communities. Other issues being faced within rural communities, a particular issue about childcare. Childcare is not just an urban issue, it's particularly an issue within rural communities. Also mental health, how much more we can support our rural communities in those issues. So I'm looking forward to we can go consultation in terms of that rural affairs policy, and that'd be quite key, and I'm really valuing the input from the committee on these issues.
Jill Guy.
Mr. Speaker, could I ask the Minister to provide an update on the implementation of carbon budgets as required by the Northern Ireland Climate Change Act?
Minister.
So the setting of the carbon budgets is, as the member outlined, a requirement of the Climate Change Act, and the regulations were considered and agreed by the Executive on the 21st of November. Work is now progressing to move these regulations to set the carbon budgets for the period 2023 to 2027 and also the 2040 emissions target through the Assembly process. My department will lay the draft legislation in the Assembly for debate and approval as soon as possible. I will bring in the draft Climate Action Plan to the Executive College as soon as possible, seeking their approval to publish the plan for 16-week consultation as required by the legislation.
This guy.
What opportunities does the Minister envisage as a result of decarbonisation?
Sir.
I thank the member for her question, and whilst there's legal obligations in terms of setting the carbon budgets and then moving forward to set the Climate Action Plan, there's also great opportunities for Northern Ireland. And one of the reasons I'm doing this job is because I believe in Northern Ireland and I have hope for the future. And I believe that we, through driving forward the implementation of the climate change legislation, and also very soon in terms of the Green Growth Strategy, which I'll bring to the Executive for approval, we can create a future which is about good green jobs. This is about prosperity for the people of Northern Ireland and ensuring it's a just and fair transition, so no one's left behind and that we include everyone on the road towards net zero. This is absolutely key, and I'm seeing the calls from businesses in terms of us taking forward action to drive decarbonisation, but also their support for net zero. And what I want us to do within this place and beyond is that together we travel that course, which is about, yes, it's about livelihoods, but also it's about lives. And it's not lost upon me that in recent times we've seen many examples where lives have been lost as a result of the impact of climate change. That's something that weighs heavily upon me, and it's something that we need to tackle in Northern Ireland.
Okay.
Dan Armstrong, apologies.
Thank you, Mr.
Had
Speaker.
your two, look at the third.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the Minister for his replies to this point. I'm going to ask a similar question to that posed by Ms McElveen earlier. Minister, given your department's decision to end funding in January 2026 for the MV testing in sheep flocks, what measures are you taking to support sheep farmers in the transition period up to that point so that Northern Ireland can keep its MV-free accreditation?
I thank the member for a question. I haven't taken any decision in relation to this, so no submissions arrived for me for approval in that regard. And if any does, I will give it due consideration. And any further steps beyond that, I will engage with the committee on this, because I think it's important we do that. The issue of MV is a challenge for Northern Ireland, and it's something I'm very conscious of, not just for my department, but also for the farming community. So I get the concerns, I hear them in the chamber, I hear them when I'm out and about, and what I can guarantee is that if we're taking any steps forward, we'll ensure that there's proper communication around this and engagement with the committee.
Ms Armstrong.
Mr. Speaker, does the Minister accept that the figures attributed to the TB programmes are way out of proportion to those for the sheep farmers, given that the MV surveillance programme cost little more than $200,000 last year compared to $50 million for the TB programmes? Is this fair and equitable?
Minister.
So the member highlights a number of the cost pressures within my department around the particular issue of animal health, and the pressures need to be met in terms of the budget for the next financial year, because the challenge within my department, not just supporting the farming community in terms of financial support, extend in terms of what we can do around animal health, and we're talking area in terms of animal welfare, and that's why I have engaged with the Finance Minister in terms of the budget settlement we get for the year ahead to see what more we can do for the people of Northern Ireland.
Egan.
Thank you. Minister, can I have an update please on the implementation of the food strategy framework?
So I was delighted to be in Carrickfergus just recently, and also at Caffrey Lockery in Cookstown to launch the food strategy framework. And this is a really positive move forward about a whole of government approach, well really, to be honest, also a whole of society approach to food. And it sets in place 4 key priorities and then a number of key principles going forward. The priorities in terms of priority 1 is enabling improved dietary related health outcomes through education and increased accessibility to healthy, nutritious food. Priority 2 is about building an environmentally sustainable and resilient agri-food supply chain. Priority 3 is about delivering a prosperous food economy. And 4 is about building a food culture and food conscious society. And then, as I said, coming out of that, there's a number of key decision-making principles. And the top principle is about the right to food, ensuring everyone in society has the right to adequate, available, accessible, safe and nutritious food. What I'm determined to do is, once we've got this agreed by the Executive and I've been able to launch it, is we work together so we can launch an action plan early next year and drive forward delivery of this, because it's absolutely key that we view food in a much better way going forward.
Egan.
Thank you, Minister. How will the food strategy framework prioritise food poverty?
Minister.
So the first principle, as I've outlined, is about the right to food, and that's where this is the whole of government approach, where we can work across government to deal with this issue. And as a member will be aware from both herself and myself visiting local food banks in North Down and beyond, that it is a real indictment of our society that we have people who are struggling to feed their families, and that's why I've put this as a top principle in terms of the food strategy framework, and that's what we want to take forward in terms of an action plan, how we can work collaboratively on these issues. And when I was in Carrickfergus, I was really inspired to see what happens there in terms of the community greengrocer. Loads of people came together to set up that community greengrocer. It's really thriving, and it's selling local produce from the local area, and I think that is really great. What we want to do is want to encourage more of those community and social farms going forward, and that's something I'm looking at as Minister.
Stephen Dunn.
Speaker, Minister, you will be aware of the recent Office for Environmental Protection report on bathing water regulations, and the report touches on the fact that these regulations are focused on swimming and do not account for other water activities such as sailing and paddleboarding, which, as you know, are enjoyed all year round in our own constituency. Will the Minister outline how and when you will address these gaps in the regulations?
Sir.
So I welcome the Office of Environmental Protection report. It was a constructive contribution to the issue in terms of bathing water quality in Northern Ireland, and the member rightly outlines that people are using our bathing waters not just for swimming but for other things such as surfing, paddleboarding and all the rest. I would have to confess I haven't taken the plunge yet in terms of the open water swimming, but maybe I might be persuaded to do it if you're prepared to join me in relation to that. We will consider the report recommendations in the time ahead, because there's a number of them which are policy recommendations and which will also require not just resources but also require us to work in partnership with local councils. I met up with those partners last week. I was in Crawfordspur Country Park and we had a useful engagement around those issues, and we talked about the Office of Environmental Protection report, because it's quite key for me in an area where bathing waters are very, very popular, that we seek to strengthen what we can do in this area.
Mr. Dunn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank the Minister for his answer. And indeed, it is, we are very fortunate to have so many areas along our coastline. Just on the back of that, will you commit to looking at introducing all year round testing at many of these spots?
That finding in terms of the report, and it's something we're going to consider. There is a resource challenge associated with that in terms of doing the testing, and also there's an issue in terms of people being able to understand if the tests are being reported as good with bathing water quality, but then there's a heavy rainfall that also we have to interpret in the context of that to be able to use bathing waters responsibly in that context. So it's something we're going to be considering, and the Office of Environmental Protection have provided the report. We'll give consideration to that and we'll write back, and I'll ensure the member gets a copy of it.
Stuart.
Mr. Speaker, Minister, could you provide an update on the Northern Ireland Food Strategy as to where that project is at the minute?
Thank the member for his question. The food strategy was agreed by the Executive just recently, and as I've outlined previously, we were able to launch that, and I think that was really good that we were able to do that. The next step is in terms of launching the action plan. It's my desire we launch that at the Balmoral Show.
Mr. Speaker, and I thank the Minister for his answer. In terms of consultation and engagement with various stakeholders, can you confirm if dietitians have been engaged up to this point, given their expertise in this field and they have a very vital role to play?
So there was significant engagement in the run-up to getting this agreed, and then there'll be engagement going on forward in terms of programme board. I'll check out the specifics in terms of dietitians and how they're involved. I think you make a useful point, and it's something we should consider.
Mr. Speaker, thank the Minister for his answer so far. Minister, farmers often play a very crucial role in helping during emergencies. We've seen that over the course of the weekend in terms of intervening with flood rescue efforts. How is the Minister and his department supporting those farmers who volunteer their time and efforts to support us during these crises?
Minister.
So I'm very aware of the recent flooding incidents across Northern Ireland, and I know my colleague in the Executive, Gordon Lyons, has activated the flood support grants associated with that, working in conjunction with councils. You raise a particular point which is valuable because the farming community does step up, not just in terms of flooding incidents but also in terms of periods of very heavy snowfall, and it's something I'm happy to engage with the member if he's got any constructive suggestions in terms of how we can further strengthen those relationships.
Guy Middleton.
Thank the Minister for his response. Minister, are there any particular initiatives or recognition that you can bring forward within your department that can give recognition to those farmers who do step up, as you have said, and sometimes feel undervalued by your department?
I would have to examine the varies within my department and what the particular ask is, but if the member is about today or tomorrow, I'm happy to have an informal chat with him so we can have further discussions on this matter.
John Mulholland.
Thank you, Minister. Can I get an update on your work to support rural communities?
So rural communities is featured quite heavily within question time today, and rightly so, because rural communities are absolutely key to the future of Northern Ireland. We're largely a rural society, and I think that's why it's right that it's debated today. A number of actions I'm taking forward, and one's particularly in terms of future rural affairs policy, and we'll go out to consultation about that in the short time ahead, and I'll be grateful to get people's feedback in that regard. So there's also issues in terms of how do we actually support the networks across Northern Ireland, and as Minister I've stepped up in that regard, and I've been chairing quarterly engagement sessions with them because it's important that process of co-design is led from the front as Minister.
Ms Mulholland.
Thank you, Minister. And I know within my own constituency there are so many groups that are doing amazing work, and I'm just wondering, they are really struggling for financial support, and what consideration are you given to further financial support for rural areas, and will you agree to meet with some of those groups with me?
Minister.
So I'm acutely aware, as a result of EU exit, the funding support previously provided under the Rural Development Programme has wound down, and the money that we receive around £330 million, which is currently earmarked by Treasury. It comes as a result of calculations from Pillar 1 and Pillar 2 payments, which includes previous payments under rural development. What I'm doing is working with colleagues around exploring what more funding we can provide in terms of rural development for our rural communities, and that's something I want to engage with the Finance Minister on, because of specific issues within our rural communities that are not probably being adequately addressed. I've outlined some of those earlier today in the Chamber, particularly issues in terms of the childcare, mental health, housing. There's so many issues that we want to work together to support. And on Saturday, I was delighted to be in Glynn, just outside Larne, to visit Jubilee Farm. And it's another example of a community farm that's doing really well. But we also need to consider how we support those as part of our rural community. So I'm doing quite a lot of work, quite a lot of positive things, and I'm quite keen to work with my executive colleagues so we can deliver for the people of Northern Ireland.
Mr. Reckon, very quickly.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Minister, your Alliance Party manifesto set in 2022 set about setting new ambitions and legally blinding targets to protect our natural environment. If that is the case, then why are you appealing no gas caverns, and particularly when they're trying to defend our maritime environment?
Minister, quickly.
The member will be aware that I outlined the issues associated with this in the written ministerial statement dated the 9th of July, and within that it very clearly outlines that the reason for the appeal is purely on constitutional grounds. And sorry, I didn't expect that from a Deputy Speaker. And very clearly outlined that in terms of the reason for the appeal, and the written ministerial statement is on the Assembly website.
We now move back to the motion supporting upland sheep farmers. I call Emma Sheeran.
Any surprise to anybody listening to